Chapter 6, Part 2 of The Brotherhood of the Seven Kings. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Brotherhood of the Seven Kings by L.T. Mead and Robert Eustace. Chapter 6, The Star-Shaped Marks. Part 2. On the next morning there was a fresh development in the unaccountable mystery. The nurse, Jane Cleaver, who had been unfeignedly grieving for the child ever since his disappearance, had gone out and had not returned. Inquiries were immediately sent on foot with regard to what had become of her, but not a clue could be obtained as to her whereabouts. On the evening of that day I called to see Durham, and found the poor fellow absolutely distracted. "If this suspense continues much longer, I believe I shall lose my reason," he said. "I cannot think what has come to me. It is not only the absence of the child. I feel as if I were under the weight of some terrible illness. I cannot explain to you what my nights are like. I have horrible nightmares. I suffer from a sensation as if I were being scorched by fire. In the morning I awake more dead than alive. During the day I get a little better, but the following night the same is repeated. The image of the child is always before my eyes. I see him everywhere. I hear his voice crying to me to come and rescue him." He turned aside, so overcome by emotion that he could hardly speak. "Durham," I said suddenly, "I have come here this evening to tell you that I have made up my mind." "To do what?" he asked. "I am going to Scotland to-morrow. I mean to visit Lady Faulkner at Bram Castle. It is quite possible that she knows something of the fate of the child. One thing at least is certain, that a person who has a strong likeness to her beguiled the little fellow round the rhododendron clump." Durham smiled faintly. "I cannot agree with you," he said. "I would stake my life on the honour of Lady Faulkner." "At least you must allow me to make inquiries," I replied. "I shall be away for a few days. I may return with tidings. Keep up your heart until you see me again." On the following evening I found myself in Inverness-shire. I put up at a small village just outside the estate of Bram. The castle, towering on its beetling cliffs, hung over the rushing waters of the river Bramley. I slept at the little inn, and early on the following morning made my way to the castle. Lady Faulkner was at home, and showed considerable surprise at seeing me. I noticed that her colour changed, and a look of consternation visited her large, beautiful eyes. "You startled me, Mr. Head," she said. "Is anything wrong?" "Wrong? Yes," I answered. "Is it possible you have not heard the news?" "What news?" she inquired. She immediately regained her self-control, sat down on the nearest chair, and looked me full in the face. "I have news which will cause you sorrow, Lady Faulkner. You were fond of Durham's boy, were you not?" "Mr. Durham's boy? Sweet little Robin?" she cried. "Of course. Has anything happened to him?" "Is it possible that you have not heard? The child is lost." I then related all that had occurred. Lady Faulkner looked at me gravely, with just the right expression of distress coming and going on her face. When I had finished my narrative there were tears in her eyes. "This will almost send Mr. Durham to his grave," she cried. "But surely the child will be found?" "The child must be found," I said. As I spoke I looked at her steadily. Immediately my suspicions were strengthened. She gazed at me with that wonderful calm which I do not believe any man could adopt. It occurred to me that she was overdoing it. The slight hardening which I had noticed before round her lovely lips became again perceptible. In spite of all her efforts, an expression the reverse of beautiful filled her eyes. "Oh, this is terrible!" she said, suddenly springing to her feet. "I can feel for Mr. Durham from my very heart. My own little Keith is so like Robin. You would like to see my boy, would you not, Mr. Head?" "I shall be glad to see him," I answered. "You have spoken before of the extraordinary likeness between the children." "It is marvellous," she cried. "You would scarcely know one from the other." She rang the bell. A servant appeared. "Tell the nurse to bring baby here," said Lady Faulkner. A moment later the door was opened. The nurse herself did not appear, but a little boy dressed in white rushed into the room. He ran up to Lady Faulkner, clasping his arms ecstatically round her knees. "Mother's own little boy," she said. She lifted him into her arms. Her fingers were loaded with rings, and I noticed as she held the child against her heart that they were trembling. Was all this excessive emotion for Durham's miserable fate? "Lady Faulkner," I said, jumping to my feet and speaking sternly, "I will tell you the truth. I have come here in a vain hope. The loss of the child is killing the poor father. Can you do anything for his relief?" "I?" she said. "What do you mean?" My words were unexpected, and they startled her. "Can you do anything for his relief?" I repeated. "Let me look at that boy. He is exactly like the child who is lost." "I always told you there was an extraordinary likeness," she answered. "Look round, baby. Look at that gentleman. Tell him you are mother's own little boy." "Mummy's boy," lisped the baby. He looked full up into my face. The blue eyes, the mass of golden hair, the slow, lovely smile. Surely I had seen them before. Lady Faulkner unfastened her locket, opened it, and gave it to me. "Feature for feature," she said. "Feature for feature the same. Mr. Head, this is my child. Is it possible—" She let the child drop from her arms and stood up confronting me. Her attitude reminded me of Ellen Douglas. "Is it possible that you suspect me?" she cried. "I will be frank with you, Lady Faulkner," I answered. "I do suspect you." She seated herself with a perceptible effort. "This is too grave a matter to be merely angry about," she said. "But do you realize what you are saying? You suspect me of having stolen Robin Durham from his father?" "God help me, I do," I answered. "Your reasons?" She took the child again on her knee. He turned towards her and caught hold of her heavy gold chain. As he did so, I remembered that I had seen Durham's boy playing with that chain in the studio at Lanchester Gardens. I briefly repeated the reasons for my fears. I told Lady Faulkner what I had overheard at the Academy. I said a few strong words with regard to Madame Koluchy. "To be a friend of that woman is to condemn you," I said at last. "Do you know what she really is?" Lady Faulkner made no answer. During the entire narrative she had not uttered a syllable. "When my husband returns home," she said at last faintly, "he will protect me from this cruel charge." "Are you prepared to swear that the boy sitting on your knee is your own boy?" I asked. She hesitated, then said boldly, "I am." "Will you take an oath on the Bible that he is your child?" Her face grew white. "Surely that is not necessary," she said. "But will you do it?" I repeated. She looked down again at the boy. The boy looked up at her. "Pretty lady," he said all of a sudden. The moment he uttered the words I noticed a queer change on her face. She got up and rang the bell. A grave-looking, middle-aged woman entered the room. "Take the baby, nurse," said Lady Faulkner. The woman lifted the boy in her arms and conveyed him from the room. "I will swear, Mr. Head," said Lady Faulkner. "There is a Bible on that table. I will swear on the Bible." She took the book in her hands, repeated the usual words of oath, and kissed the book. "I declare that that boy is my own son, born of my body," she said, slowly and distinctly. "Thank you," I answered. I laid the Bible down on the table. "What else do you want me to do?" she said. "There is one test," I replied, "which, in my opinion, will settle the matter finally. The test is this. If the boy I have just seen is indeed your son, he will not recognize Durham, for he has never seen him. If, on the other hand, he is Durham's boy, he cannot fail to know his father, and to show that he knows him when he is taken into his presence. Will you return with me to town to-morrow, bringing the child with you? If little Robin's father appears as a stranger to the boy, I will believe that you have spoken the truth." Before Lady Faulkner could reply, a servant entered the room bearing a letter on a salver. She took it eagerly and tore it open, glanced at the contents, and a look of relief crossed her face as her eyes met mine. They were bright now, and full of a curious defiance. "I am willing to stand the test," she said. "I will come with you to-morrow." "With the boy?" "Yes, I will bring the boy." "You must allow him to enter Durham's presence without you." "He shall do so." "Good," I answered. "We can leave here by the earliest train in the morning." I left the castle a few minutes later and wired to Dufrayer, telling him that Lady Faulkner and I would come up to town early on the following day, bringing Lady Faulkner's supposed boy with us. I asked Dufrayer not to prepare Durham in any way. Late in the evening I received a reply to my telegram. "Come by first train," were its contents. "Durham is seriously ill." I thought it best to say nothing of the illness to Lady Faulkner, and at an early hour on the following day we started on our journey. No nurse accompanied the child. He slept a good part of the day. Lady Faulkner herself was almost silent. She scarcely addressed me. Now and then I saw her eyes light upon the child with a curious expression. Once, as I was attending to her comfort, she looked me full in the face. "You doubt me, Mr. Head," she said. "It is impossible for me to feel friendly towards you until your doubts are removed." "I am more grieved than I can say," I answered, "but I must, God helping me, at any cost, see justice done." She shivered. At 7 p.m. we steamed into King's Cross. Dufrayer was on the platform, and at the carriage door in a second. from the grave expression on his